Welcome students to another CSEC episode. I am Albert Inchinali and this is CSEC Social Studies. If you're watching across Guyana, I must give you a special shout out for today, especially those of you who are in Region 6. All of our students in Region 6, if you're from New Amsterdam Multilateral, Berbice High School, J.C. Chandy Singh, Quarantine Comprehensive High, Lower Quarantine Secondary, Port Moran Secondary, big up yourselves. I certainly hope that you benefit from this session. Also, those of you who are watching on YouTube and you're living outside of Guyana, I see your comments and I'm so happy that you all get access to this as well. So welcome one and all, call your friends, let them know it's CSEC Past Paper Time, Social Studies, Multiple Choice. Let's go. Let's get right into it. Our first question, students. The constitutions of Commonwealth Caribbean countries guarantee citizens freedom of conscience, expression, assembly, and movement. These freedoms are usually referred to as a citizenship, civic duties, human rights, or independence. What do you think? When you are allowed to move freely in your country, when you are allowed to speak your mind, when you are allowed to share your thoughts, what do we call that? Is it citizenship, civic duties, human rights, or independence? Did you say human rights? Yes. These are freedoms that we enjoy as human beings. To safeguard our human dignity, we have the right to speak, freedom of expression. We have the right to move. We have the right to assemble. We have the right to an education. We have the right to quality health care. All of these would be considered as human rights, not citizenship, not civic duties, not independence, but more aptly, human rights. Now let's look at our next question. Which of the following statements best describes the functions of a government which follows the Westminster model? Which of the following statements best describe the functions of a government which follows the Westminster model? A, it rules the nation entirely by decree. It makes laws, interprets them, and enforces them. It makes laws but cannot interpret or enforce them. Or D, it makes laws, interprets them, but cannot enforce them. When we think of the Westminster model, what comes to mind? Did you say the United Kingdom? Yes, the Westminster model is a government system that we would have inherited from Great Britain as a result of us being colonies of Great Britain. And there are many aspects of it that is still evident in the Commonwealth Caribbean today. One tenet of the Westminster model has to do with the separation of powers. We have the executive branch of government, we have the legislative branch of government, and we have the judiciary. So which answer here best describes the Westminster model? We adopt the Westminster model. Does it mean that the nation is entirely ruled by decree? Whatever the head of state says goes all the time, without having a vote on it, without it being debated in the National Assembly? Of course not. We don't have a nation that is entirely ruled by decree. What we have is a system whereby we make laws, the legislative branch of government makes the laws, we interpret the law, and we enforce the law. That is what we have, the separation of powers. So B is our correct answer. Now let us look at our next question, question 3. The role of the opposition in Parliament can best be described as A, analyzing government's policies and presenting alternatives, B, opposing policies which the ruling party proposes, C, inciting civil disobedience and mass protests, or D, voting in favor of all bills debated in Parliament. What is the role of the opposition? Very important for us to know that the opposition is a political party that is not in power, but yet they have a say because they're part of the National Assembly and they get to vote on bills that potentially can become laws. So what is the role of the opposition? Is the role of the opposition to oppose policies which the ruling party proposes? Just because the government proposes a policy, the opposition should squash it, should give it no consideration? No, that is not the role of the opposition. Is the role of the opposition to incite civil disobedience and mass protests? Because the opposition is not in power, it should encourage its supporters to not do what is best for the country? Of course not. So C, we eliminate that. Is it that they should vote in favor of all bills debated in Parliament? No, not every bill should get a positive response in Parliament. So the best answer here is A. The role of the opposition is to analyze the government's policies and present alternatives. The role of the opposition is to ensure that there is transparency, accountability, soundness as it relates to these policies. And if these policies are not adequate, if these policies have shortcomings, then the opposition should present or suggest alternatives. What else could we do? What better plan do we have than the government's? So A would be the correct answer. Now let us look at our next question. Which of the following Caribbean countries have a republican form of government? A, Jamaica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. B, Antigua and Barbuda and Montserrat. C, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. D, Barbados and St. Kitts and Nevis. Which group of Caribbean countries here have a republican form of government? First, let us understand what is a republican form of government. Did you say it's a country that has a president as a head of state and not a monarch such as a queen? Of course, yes. And the countries there that we should know that have a president would certainly be Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. We are the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. In both of these countries, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, they have presidents that are the head of state. In Guyana, the president is the executive head of state, the one who makes the final decisions, who is also the head of the government. With Trinidad and Tobago, the prime minister is the head of government and the president is the head of state and has more of a ceremonial role. But nevertheless, in those two countries, the head of state would be the president, which makes them republics. Very good. Can you think of another country that recently became a republic that is in this list? Yes, it would be Barbados. Barbados is the newest republic on the block, but St. Kitts and Nevis is not a republic, so we cannot choose D as the correct answer. Our next question, students. In a constitutional monarchy, the political leader of the victorious party becomes A, the Governor General, B, the Prime Minister, C, President of the Senate, D, Leader of the House. In order to answer such a question, we must first understand what is a constitutional monarchy. Did you say a constitutional monarchy is an independent country that has its own constitution, but yet a monarch is the head of state? Yes, that is what a constitutional monarchy is. And in such a situation, the political leader of the victorious party becomes what? The answer there would be B, the prime minister. In a constitutional monarchy, there are no presidents. It is not a republic. It's a constitutional monarchy. The head of state is not the president. It is the queen, the monarch. But the leader of the victorious party would be the prime minister. And the governor general would be the queen's representative or the monarch's representative. So the best answer here, rather the only answer here would be B, prime minister. All right, let's look at our next question. In all CARICOM countries, citizens have the right to vote. This right is preserved because A, general elections occur every 4 or 5 years. Citizens only vote if required by the law to do so. It is enshrined in the constitutions of these countries. Or D, there are 2 or more political parties for which citizens vote. If we have the right to vote, students, that right is preserved because of what reason? Because we have elections every 4 to 5 years? Is that why the right is preserved? No. Is it because we're only required to vote by law? We only vote by law if we're required to do so? No. It is because the right is preserved because it is enshrined in the constitutions of these countries. We have a right to vote because the Constitution says we are eligible to vote once we are of sound mind and we are at least 18 years of age. And that is the right that is afforded to us by the Constitution. Our next question, students. A country's constitution may be changed by A, a referendum, B, national elections, C, national registration, or D, local government elections. If we're going to make significant changes to the Constitution that affects all the citizens of a country, then how can this change be possible? National elections, when we go and vote for our political leaders, is that a time when we vote for a change in the Constitution? Of course not. National registration, when you're going to get registered to vote at an elections, does that mean that the country's constitution can be changed? Of course not. Local government elections, that has nothing to do with our national constitution. So the answer here would be A, a referendum. A referendum is a process whereby the electorate, the eligible citizens of a country, they go out to the polls to vote. But they're not voting for a political leader. They're voting for a decision that has to be made regarding national interests, such as a country's constitution that may need to be changed. The reason why referendums happen is because the government and the opposition, they want the average person to have a direct say into the outcome of a very monumental decision that has to be taken. So they're not voting in the National Assembly about it. They're allowing all of us to go out and vote for that particular decision to be made. So yes, a country's constitution may be changed by A, a referendum. Next question. In which of the following countries is proportional representation used to elect the government? In which of the following countries is proportional representation used to elect the government? Is it Guyana? Is it Barbados? Is it Dominica? Is it St. Vincent? Do you know, students, what do we mean by proportional representation? Proportional representation is an electoral system whereby seats in parliament are allocated to each party in direct proportion to the percentage of votes it gains. In other words, if a political party gains 40% of all the votes in the country, then it means that party has 40% of all the seats. The votes are in proportion to the number of seats the political party has, and the result certainly reflects the will of the people. So which one of these countries utilizes proportional representation? Did you say Guyana? Yes, our very own country is one of the few, if not the only, in CARICOM that uses proportional representation. We're the only country here in this list that uses this electoral system. Barbados, Dominica, and St. Vincent, they use what we call first past the post. And with first past the post, the entire country is divided into electoral districts known as constituencies. And political parties that win the most constituencies, they get the most seats in government, in parliament, and they would have won the elections. That's very different from what we do in Guyana. Now let's look at our next question. Which of the following documents do political parties in the Caribbean usually use to inform the public about their policies, promises, and programs? Is it A, Hansard, B, Manifesto, C, Policy Statement, or D, Conference Papers? During an election cycle, political parties may publish their policies, their promises, and the programs that they have for the country if they get into office. What do we call the name of that official document? What is a Hansard, by the way? A Hansard is an official document, but it has to do with the transcripts of parliamentary debates. So that is quite different from the agenda that a political party has. The answer here, students, would be B, a manifesto. Usually the document is published in the newspapers. You might find it on social media, on a website. It has all the policies, all the promises, all the programs that political parties want us to be aware of so that we vote for them to get into office. Not a policy statement, not a conference paper, but a manifesto. So the answer there is B. Our next question. A political campaign is a method used by political parties to do what? Is it A, give voice to the people, B, give donations to the needy, C, encourage persons to vote, or D, get funding from the public? What is the purpose of a political campaign? During an election cycle, political parties have political campaigns. They launch their campaigns. What is the purpose of it? Do they give voice to the people? No, that's not the purpose of a political campaign. It's not to give voice to the people, it's to speak to the people. Is it to give donations to the needy? No, political parties are not charitable organizations. So they're not concerned about giving donations to the needy. Even though they may do that, it is not the purpose of a political campaign. Is it to encourage persons to vote? Yes, it is to encourage persons to vote. When politicians go and visit different communities as part of a political campaign and they hold rallies, it's to encourage persons to vote. Not get funding from the public. They don't solicit funds from the public, from every citizen. No. The purpose of a political campaign is to encourage persons to vote. Our next question, students, which of the following is not included in the written constitution of a country? The constitution is the supreme law of the land. Which of the following is not included in the written constitution of a country? A, methods of taxation. B, responsibilities of citizens. C, powers and functions of officers of the state. Or D, powers and responsibilities of Parliament. In this official document, which is not included? Will we find powers and responsibilities of Parliament? Yes. We'll find the powers of the Speaker of the House. We'll find the responsibilities of Parliament, voting on bills that can eventually become laws. In the Constitution, do we have powers and functions of officers of the state? Do we know what are the functions of the President, the Prime Minister, the cabinet members? Yes, we'll find all of that in the Constitution. What about the responsibilities of citizens? What we ought to do and ought not to do? Will we find that in the Constitution? Certainly. So that leaves us with A, methods of taxation. The different ways a government may tax the citizens. Will we find that in the written Constitution? No. The government itself will determine what methods of taxation they would like to pursue. And every government has its own methods of taxation. So this is not what we will find in the written constitution of a country. The constitution is permanent, it's long-lasting, it exists for many, many decades with changes made periodically, but methods of taxation can fluctuate and change often. So we'll not find methods of taxation in the written constitution of a country. Next question, students. What is one of the main duties of the Speaker of the House of Representatives? What is one of the main duties of the Speaker of the House of Representatives? In Guyana, we don't have a bicameral legislature. We don't have a lower house and an upper house. We don't have a Senate and a House of Representatives. Nevertheless, we have a Speaker of the National Assembly. And the Speaker of the National Assembly has the same roles, the same duties as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So what is one of the main duties of such a speaker? Is it A, to regulate House debates? Is it B, to represent the President? Is it C, to make important speeches? Is it D, to support government policy? Let's look at these options. Is the Speaker responsible for supporting government policy? No. The Speaker may actually be a member of the opposition, and the Speaker has no responsibility to support government policy. Is the speaker's main duty to make very fanciful and important speeches? Even though the speaker may make speeches, that is not one of his or her main duties. Is it to represent the president? No, the speaker does not represent anyone in the National Assembly. The speaker's job is not to represent the president. The prime minister may represent the president, cabinet members may represent the president, but the speaker in the National Assembly or in the House of Representatives is not there in the capacity of a government supporter. So B is out. So then that leaves us with A, to regulate House debates. The speaker's main duty, one of it, is to regulate, to facilitate the House debates, to give members of the government an opportunity to speak, to give members of the opposition an opportunity to speak, to regulate how long they are allowed to speak, and to really facilitate that process and to ensure that all speakers are in agreement with the rules of the House and they act accordingly. So the answer there would be A. All right, class. What is our next question? Which of the following are non-tax sources of revenue for government? Which of the following are non-tax sources of revenue for the government? Is it A, salaries, B, customs duties, C, export earnings, D, grants from donor agencies? Which of the following are non-tax sources of revenue for government? When we speak of revenue, we are referring to the income that the government has, the financial assets that the government has that they can use at their disposal for the citizens. So which one of the following are non-tax sources of revenue for government? Are salaries taxed? Yes. If you are a worker, you pay income tax. So that is certainly a taxable source of income. But the question is asking for a non-tax source of revenue. Salaries, income tax, it's taxable source of income. What about customs duties? Is that a tax? Certainly. It's revenue, but it refers to a tax imposed on goods when they are transported across international borders. In simpler terms, it is the tax that is levied on import and export of goods. The government uses this duty to raise its revenues. So yes, customs duties, that's a taxable source of revenue. Salaries, export earnings as well. When companies export from Guyana resources and finished products from Guyana, they have to pay taxes to the government. So that leaves us with D. Grants from donor agencies are not taxed. These are non-tax sources of revenue. A grant from a donor agency can be considered as a gift to the government, as a gift to the people of a country. So it wouldn't make sense to tax these grants. So the answer there is D. Grants from donor agencies are non-tax sources of revenue for government. Our next question, students. Which of the following are items of expenditure for a government? We have many options here. Salaries for civil servants, that's one. 2, old age pensions. 3, customs duties. Is it A, 1 and 2 only, B, 1 and 3 only, C, 2 and 3 only, or D, 1, 2, and 3 only? If you understood the previous question, it would be easier for us to get this one correct. expenditure has to do with expenses, what the government is spending on to provide for its people. Revenue means money coming into the country, money that the government has to spend, money that the government has for different projects. Expenditure is when you spend the revenue. So, which of the following are items of expenditure for a government? Does the government spend on salaries for civil servants? Yes. If you are employed by the government, if you work in a school as a teacher, if you are a nurse or a doctor employed at one of our governmental hospitals, one of our state hospitals, then certainly salaries for these workers would be items of expenditure for a government. What about old age pensions? Where is the money coming from? The government as well, yes. If you're 65 years of age or older, then this would be a cause for expenditure by the government to provide for old age pension. What about customs duties? Is that an item of expenditure? Certainly not. Customs duties would be revenue that the government gets when taxes are imposed on goods when they're transported across international borders. So customs duties would not be an item of expenditure for a government. It would be number 1 and number 2. So our correct answer there is A. Salaries for civil servants, that's an item of expenditure, and old age pension, that's an item of expenditure because the government has to spend money on providing for these allowances. All right, let's look at our next question. A national budget has a deficit when expenditure is A, equal to revenue, B, less than revenue, C, greater than revenue, or D, sufficient to finance development. A national budget has a deficit when expenditure is what? What do we mean by a deficit? A deficiency, right? A decrease, a shortcoming, a shortfall, rather. So if we have a national budget, we have a plan of all our intentional spending that we want to do, and we have a deficit, meaning we have more expenses than revenue, it certainly means that expenditure is greater than revenue. So the correct answer there is C. A deficit or a deficiency in the national budget will occur when expenditure is greater than revenue. In other words, we're spending more money than what is coming into the country. So that would be a deficit that a national budget has. All right, next question. In the English-speaking Caribbean, the first court of hearing for criminal offenses is usually what? Is it the Court of Appeal? Is it the Coroner's Court, Court of Assizes, or is it the Magistrate's Court? If there's conflict, if someone is accused of a crime, which is the first court of hearing for criminal offenses? Usually, the Court of Appeal is the last court, unless we take the matter to the Caribbean Court of Justice. So Court of Appeal will not be the first court. Coroner's Court has to do with inquiries into how people may die. If the details or the events surrounding someone's death is sketchy, you go to the Coroner's Court. but it may not be the first court. The Court of Assizes also is not the first court. It's usually done to deal with matters that may be of a sexual offense or murder, anything that is very serious. So Court of Assizes would not be the first court to hear criminal offenses. And that leaves us with D, the Magistrate's Court. Yes, if there's reasonable evidence that suggests that someone is guilty of a crime, the matter is first heard in the Magistrate's Court. If the situation is very serious, then the matter moves on to the High Court. But the first court of hearing for criminal offenses would be the Magistrate's Court. Whether it is a petty offense or not, the Magistrate's Court would hear those preliminary inquiries and do its best to deal with the matter, and if not, it moves on to a higher court. All right, what is the main function of a prosecutor in the judicial system? What is the main function of a prosecutor in the judicial system? Is it A, to issue a summons to a witness, B, provide counsel for the defendant, C, present arguments against the defendant, or determine the verdict at the end of the trial? What is the main function of a prosecutor? Do we know who is a prosecutor? That's very important. A prosecutor, students, is a legal official who accuses someone of committing a crime, especially in a court of law. So a prosecutor is that legal official who accuses someone of committing a crime. Sometimes that legal official is acting on behalf of the state. So which of these options here tells us the main function of a prosecutor? Is it to issue a summons to a witness? No, that's not the job of a prosecutor. The job of a prosecutor is not going to a witness and saying, hey, you have to appear in court. No. Is it to provide counsel for the defendant? No, that is not what the prosecutor does. The prosecutor actually presents arguments against the defendant. So the prosecutor cannot provide advice for the defendant. The defendant is the one, as the name suggests, who would be defending the charge against him or her. So yes, the prosecutor presents arguments against the defendant. The prosecutor does not determine the verdict at the end of the trial. It's the jury and the judge that may arrive at the verdict at the end of the trial, not the prosecutor. So the answer here, students, would be C. The prosecutor presents arguments against the defendant. Answer C. All right, let us keep it going. We have one more question, the last question for us. Are you going to get this one correct? I certainly hope so. Which of the following outlines the order through which a bill proceeds to become a law in most Caribbean countries? Which of the following outlines the order through which a bill becomes a law in most Caribbean countries? Is it A, the Governor General or President, then it moves on to the upper house and then the lower house? Is it B, it goes first to the lower house, then the upper house, then goes to the Governor General or President? Is it C, it goes first to the upper house, then the Governor General or President, and then lastly the lower house? Or is it D, it is first debated in the lower house, then goes to the Governor General and President, for his approval and then goes to the upper house? What do you think, students? How does a bill becomes a law? Do you know? Well, a bill is actually an act of parliament in draft, and no bill can become law until it is approved by the houses of parliament, the lower house as well as the upper house. In Guyana, we don't have a bicameral situation. We have a unicameral situation that exists where we have one house called the National Assembly. But nevertheless, before a bill becomes a law, it must receive the formal assent of the Governor General or President. In other words, the last step, the last stage of a bill becoming a law has to do with the Governor General or President ascending to the bill. In other words, giving his signature to the bill for it to become law. Which one of these options? We have the Governor General or President representing the last stage. Did you say B? Yes, that would be the correct answer. The bill is debated in the lower house. It's debated upon, it is voted upon. There might be a special committee that decides whether the bill should have certain amendments or changes being made to it. And then lastly, a vote is taken. And if a majority says that the bill should become a law, then the Governor General or the President assents to the bill. So the answer there is B. And there you have it, students. These were all questions that appeared on past CSEC Social Studies Paper 1. So it therefore means that you would have had enough practice today, and I certainly hope that if you see a question of this nature or one similar to it, you would be able to answer correctly. Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Albert Inshanali, and this is CSEC Social Studies.